Hey there. I'm going to try to tell you a few stories about South Africa today. And I'll start by pointing out that it's the nation that is on the tip of the African continent. It's one of the few nations that has another nation inside it. Lesotho is a tiny mountain nation inside of the South African Union. And there's also this carve out for a small country called Swaziland. This mountain chain is what keeps this area above the ocean. And this area down here, that is sort of the tip of Africa, is sometimes called the Horn of Africa, where the town of Cape Town is. Here's a picture of Cape Town. It's a beautiful city right on the water, and then it has these mountains rising up from behind it. The capital city of South Africa is Pretoria, which is farther up here. And it's there because that is the center of South Africa's mineral wealth. The main industry in South Africa is mining, and the mines of South Africa produce asbestos, copper, iron, manganese, platinum, uranium, but diamonds are what South Africa is known for. And these diamond mines in South Africa produced a kind of gem diamonds, beautiful large gem diamonds, including the largest diamond in the world, which was mined out of South Africa and is now in possession of the Queen of England. This is an interesting example of Encyclopedia Britannica, which I've told you is an encyclopedia like Wikipedia, but just as untrustworthy when it comes to sometimes getting things wrong. Here's an example. So this is the ethnic composition of South Africa according to Encyclopedia Britannica. Mostly black, some white, some Asian, and you'll notice they've put this green bar here, green pie, and they call it mixed white and black. That's Encyclopedia Britannica interpreting something that's really much, much more complicated. If you ask South Africans how they identify, instead of using mixed white-black, that group of 8.9% will call themselves colored. And the meaning of colored in America may be mixed white and black, but in South Africa, it means something really entirely different, or entirely more complicated, I should say. So let me see if I can tell you the history that explains why we have all these different racial groups living together for generations in South Africa. So here's South Africa, and the indigenous community of South Africa was called the San community or the Khoi, sometimes called Khoisan to refer to them all together. And they lived here in South Africa since the dawn of time. Towards the more modern era, a group of folks who came from the Central Africa, Bantu-speaking people, moved into South Africa and took over mostly in the north. These groups call themselves the Hausa, the Zulu, and some other groups. And that's the way things were when the Dutch, people from the Netherlands, came sailing down the coast of Africa and decided to set up a colony here at the Cape of Good Hope. They moved in, set up a lot of farms, and went into the business of selling supplies to boats that were sailing around the Horn of Africa. And so Cape Town became their capital, and Cape Town became a busy shipping port. And the Dutch enslaved the Khoisan people and forced them to work on farms and grew vegetables and things, which they then sold to the boats that went by. And by this time by the time they got to the Horn of Africa, they would really need supplies. So it was a good business, and the Dutch lived here for many generations as farmers, pretty much wiping out the culture of the Khoisan people. In the modern era, though, in the 1800s, the British got interested in the South African region and decided to make it a part of their empire across the continent of Africa. So it's a cartoon representing their desire to have an empire that stretched from the top to the very tip. In order to do that, they had to take the land away from the Dutch, who by this time were calling themselves Afrikaners, to reflect the fact that they felt African, or Boer, which is a word they use for farmer. To escape the British, the Dutch moved farther north into South Africa, away from Cape Town, And that brought them into conflict with the Zulu, here represented by the most recent Zulu king. The British, in turn, brought folks from India, and often as indentured servants, kind of almost slaves who had sold a part of their life to the British in exchange for the opportunity to come to South Africa and have a job. And so that brings Indian descended people into South Africa for several generations now. Eventually, the British decided they wanted the whole colony, and they fought a giant war with the Dutch as well as the Zulu. And when they had taken over, they made a sort of a compromise with the Dutch people. They said, look, we'll let white people be in high status, in charge, and able to have all the best jobs, all of the votes, all of the political positions in South Africa. But it'll still be a British colony, not a Dutch colony. And the Dutch accepted this kind of arrangement in which they lost their colony, but at least they were still better off than the Zulu and Hausa and the Black people of South Africa. And that's the way things remained after the colony became independent from the British, with a white dominating group that ran government, and Black and Indian people unable to vote and unable to participate in government until 1994, until very recently. And when the South African nation underwent a transformation and became a multi-ethnic community where everyone has one vote. And that's ultimately the story that we're going to study. But let's backtrack and think about race. So what that means is that we have a lot of folks who are Indian in South Africa, been there for several generations, a lot of folks who are white. Mostly these are the descendants of the Dutch, Afrikaners, they call themselves. A lot of folks who are Black, Hausa, Zulu, and others. And this group called Colored, which it turns out is mostly descended from the Khoisan and much mixed with white and Indian because the Khoisan were much more in contact with the Dutch. So when a person from South Africa calls themselves colored, they're actually in a way identifying with this indigenous group called the Khoisan. So if you ask people about their language, you get a much more interesting picture, diverse picture. You have the Zulu language, the Hausa language is very big, and then Sesotho, Setswana, Sepedi, as well as English because of the influence of the British, and Afrikaans, which is a kind of Dutch language, changed to accommodate the sounds of some of the native languages of South Africa. And so in order to be an educated person in South Africa, you generally have to speak several of these languages. So what you have in South Africa is a huge diversity of folks who've been mixing culturally and ethnically and linguistically for a long, long time, and a very diverse multicultural society. If you ask people about their religion, most people are practicing Christian. There are a lot of folks practicing traditional religions. Muslim and Hindu people generally descended from the folks who came from India. And then, all the usual modern non-religious and less religious people. South African art is very much influenced by all the different both African ethnic groups and people from around the world who are there. And the tradition of painting goes all the way back to some cave paintings that we have in near Pretoria, and to the modern art expressions that you see today. Quite exciting use of color is traditional. The food also reflects all those different ethnic groups. In the center here is a dish called bobotie, which is kind of a Dutch meatloaf thing. And then you have curry from the Indian tradition, all different kinds of British food, and a wide variety of dishes that are descended from the African tradition, various kinds of barbecue. It goes on and on. It's one of the best places in the world to get different kinds of food, I'm told. South Africa is also a center of the world's music community. And so I wanted to show a little bit of like more traditional music and a little bit of modern music. In particular, right now, South African musicians are driving the dance music and the development of dance music. So let's start with traditional, though. This is Ladysmith Black Mambazo, which is an all a cappella group. And they're using a real traditional style here called call and response, where you hear a lead singer and a chorus, and they sort of respond to each other. So let's see if I can get this to play. That's Zulu, the language that they're singing in. And you'll notice that, like Hausa, it has clicks. So every once in a while, there's this kind of clicking sound that comes out of the voice, and that's integrated in with all the other sounds. So this is a dance tune that has been making the rounds as a dance challenge. And so Albany High, listen up. Can you do this?
Jerusalema, ikhaya lami, ilondoloze, uhambe nami, zungangishilana. Jerusalema, ikhaya lami, ilondoloze, uhambe nami, zungangishilana. Dawo yami ayikholana, buso wami awukholana, ilondoloze, zuhambe nami. Dawo yami ayikholana, buso wami awukholana, ilondoloze.
I hope you caught all the elements there. You must wear cool sunglasses. You must dance really well. You must eat at the same time and keep the rhythm all the way through to the end of the song. Plus, hold something on your head, maybe. So if you're ready for that dance challenge, the song is called Jerusalema, and you can post your own video. The singer is Master KG. So I'll let you guys come back and check out the links on this later on. But I wanted to talk a little bit about this society that was built out of colonialism in South Africa. So this original deal that the British made with white South Africans, with the Dutch descended people, the Afrikaners, was that they would have privileges and a segregated and better life than Black people. Even though they lost their colony to the British. And when the British left, the Dutch descended people, the Afrikaners, doubled down on this and created the world's most codified system of racial segregation and discrimination. Perhaps the only one worse ever than the Jim Crow system in the United States. So under this system, there was a law that prevented people from mixing and created this situation, which is called a township, where only Black people could live and cities where only white people could live. The laws, the apartheid laws, and apartheid is a Dutch word meaning, or an Afrikaans word meaning separation. The apartheid laws categorized every single person by race. It made it illegal for people to marry in between those groups, and then made it illegal for people of certain races to live in certain areas. So it created this area called the homelands, the Black homelands, townships, I called them earlier, where Black people were forced to live, and took away the majority of the land in South Africa and gave it to the whites. And the result, of course, is that white people were also in control of the majority of the money. This is gross national product in South Africa. And Black people were unable to get most of the jobs and any of the benefits of South African economy. So that system of codified, legalized discrimination and racial segregation lasted until 1990. And resulted in, even though the population is mostly Black, resulted in the very high rates of infant mortality for Black people, very low income for Black people, and very high unemployment for Black people. These statistics come from the late 80s, right before the end of apartheid. But in fact, what happened is that Black people and Indian communities resisted apartheid and fought against it. And at the end of the 1980s, they succeeded in overthrowing that government and building a new government in which all people, white, Indian, and Black, are allowed to vote, and in which the president is a Black person. So Nelson Mandela was the first elected president of the free South Africa. And here you see people voting in the first ever free election in 1994. And this is the flag of South Africa today, which was designed to show all of the races equally, Black, yellow, white, and all of the ideas and ideas of freedom shared equally. Obviously, that's a goal and not a reality. And just like the United States struggles to overcome its history of racism, South Africa struggles to overcome its history. But the process by which South Africa changed and got rid of apartheid is what we will study later on this week. So I look forward to seeing you then. You have a reading to do before Friday, and it covers some of the history that I've tried to summarize. And at the very end, as a treat, I've given you some of the writing of Stephen Biko, a South African activist who fought against apartheid and was a big advocate of something called Black consciousness. And so I'm hoping you'll have a look, because I think Black consciousness has a lot to teach us all about how to be proud of ourselves. So that is the last page of the reading that I've given you, and you have until Friday to do that. It's both in the Green Book and electronically on the class website. Talk to you then.